Hey everybody, this is Perch, and so how often can you tell the same story or tell a certain kind of character conflict before it just gets tiring? And what I mean by that, I was thinking, I don't know why, but I was thinking about a stream I did with Joe, and we were looking at some of the upcoming solicitations, some of the things that were going to be happening with Spider-Man, and they were pushing at the time that, guess what? The Green Goblin Norman Osborn is going to cause some troubles for Spider-Man. And I remember Joe's reaction of like, "Oh, it's a Green Goblin. What are we out of ideas? Throw the Green Goblin in there." I remember it was just kind of a funny, sarcastic moment. It wasn't that serious, but it did get me thinking a lot. Especially lately. Of at what point do you hit a moment where you've just gone to the well with a character or a conflict or a villain, whatever it happens to be, just once too often that you've done enough of it. And certainly, what caught me back thinking about this again was they're doing Spider-Man 900, and they're saying, it's the Sinister Six. They're back again, and it shows Doc Ock is in his white suit, and he's back on the attack again, and it got me thinking. I'm a believer that you do not need to reboot or reset or change the superhero or radically cause status quo. You could just tell good, solid stories. But I also think that you can hit a moment where you've told a certain type of the same story so many times that it no longer it no longer does the trick. Nobody gets interested in it anymore. And I think that there's certain cases like with Spider-Man. How do you get people interested in a Green Goblin story at this point? With Spider-Man. Like, it's Spider-Man, Norman Osborn's up to no good, and here's a Green Goblin. Like, on some level, haven't you read that story like 100 times? Is there anything new you can do with it? I think this is the dilemma that gets a lot of comic writers and everybody kind of trapped in this odd place where, on one hand, you do not want to tell the 568th Doc Ock story where Doc Ock is, I don't know, trying to steal something. He's got to try to get some science to do some kind of nefarious thing, and Spider-Man shows up and foils his how do you tell that story in a new and exciting and compelling way? Is there a way you can tell it in a new and compelling way, or is it impossible? I don't think it's impossible, but I do think it gets hard, particularly when you kind of do the same things over and over. Like, for example, could a talented writer tell a story of Captain America? He finds out some dark secret about America. It troubles him. He's questioning kind of American beliefs, but he still believes in the country. And somehow the Red Skull is behind it all. Can you do if a good writer, I think, can still turn in a good story with that as the general plot? I think it's possible. But I feel like your odds are pretty long that you're going to be able to do that effectively in a way that anybody will ultimately care, because they have told that exact story dozens of times by this point, and it doesn't feel like that's even a road to go down. If I was coming onto Captain America, and they're like, "All right, you could do whatever you want, Perch, just whatever you would like to do, go for it." I don't know. I would probably go. I would do Batroc. I would do something with maybe the Serpent Society. The Masters of Evil. Try something there. Maybe we could get into some kind of Doctor Doom. I mean, the funny thing is, if you had a Captain America story and you wanted to portray the classic Steve is discouraged by something in America and he's got to kind of figure it all out. One way to do that might be, Captain America gets sent internationally to do something. He realizes that America is funding a militia that's causing a lot of harm. He's questioning why America would do this. But ultimately he finds out that Doctor Doom and Latvernia are involved, and Doom is like a terrible dictator. And so he's got to kind of fight his way through Doom's minions and ultimately Doom himself. And the context of all this is, yeah, America's maybe done some shady stuff, but There's clearly worse places, and there's reasons why it's not always that simple when you're talking about how you fight a dictator. And there's a story you could do in there. Still not the one I would do, but if you really wanted to lean into politics, you could try that. But in a lot of cases, I think that is the challenge that people get into is they want to tell, a kind of classic story. I think the editors often push them to tell something that is like not original. Like we really need, if your pitch is going to be Captain America, then your pitch really needs to include Captain America feeling bad about America. That's the story. That's the story. That's the one we've got. That's it. You got to do that one. And so I think people go down kind of the same route over and over and over. And I'm sure it doesn't help the fact that a lot of these creators do not own the characters, so they're working at the behest of the editors and the publisher. They don't have any financial incentive to really break the mold, and this is the result. Not a good one, but that is the result we wind up in. I don't know. I think that's. I think that there's a point where if an editor was really, I don't say doing their job, but if they're really kind of managing the character well, they'd say, hey, look, we cannot do another Spider-Man Doc Ock story. We cannot do Spider-Man Green Goblin. We just can't do it for 2 years. Maybe you have the most beautiful pitch in the world that is going to be different from what we've seen before, but I'd like you to not even go down that route. So please pick from the 98% of other characters that we've got, because that story has been driven into the ground and murdered. You've got to bring something new. That to me is, in many cases, the job of the editor, the job of the publisher, the person who's trying to kind of curate ultimately the line of what's coming out from the character. And I think you don't need to get to a hard and fast rule. It feels like this gets stretched so far with telling the same repeated stories over and over and over again that there's finally some kind of almost blow up inside the publisher of like, all right, no more Green Goblin for 5 years. Everybody's like, okay, all right. That whole character is blacklisted. It's a total ban on that character. The problem with that approach is that because Norman Osborn is such an ongoing part of Peter's life, that he just vanishes for 5 years. That comes across as jarring and weird. And when eventually they go, it's been 5 years, probably enough time, let's do another Green Goblin story, the story they do is almost always the exact same plot and story and thrust of everything they did before. They waited a while before they did it again, but in the end, they did the same thing. That's the challenge that I have, and that's really the problem that I think a lot of people come into. Anyway, I don't know. My opinion on all this, I think it's. I think the trick is really how do you take a character? It's been around for decades and decades and decades. How do you keep that character fresh? How do you continue to tell stories, which I think is very possible. What's always weird to me is the characters that seem to have this problem the most. So Spider-Man, to some extent Superman, Batman, Captain America. They seem to have this problem where they go the same well over and over and over again. What's puzzling to me is those characters I just mentioned, between the four of them, have to have at least 1,000 villains in their bag. I mean, Spider-Man has so many villains. There's no shortage of conflict and character stuff you could do with them. So why is it then that we constantly go back to the same stories with that character? It's very weird to me. It's completely bizarre. Captain America, with all the stuff you could do with him, adventure stories, political thriller, espionage, all this kind of stuff. Why do we need the Captain America's lost faith in America and realizes Red Skull is behind turning people against America and that's bad? Like, why do they have to keep doing that? Why is it that Batman, it's like, well, we got a rogues gallery that is absurdly huge for Batman, but here comes the Joker, and he's got a plan to terrorize the city somehow. And this time, he knows it's Bruce, or he suspects it's Bruce, or he has a feeling that it's connected to Bruce in some way, or he's targeting Bruce's family, or, it just, like, why is it that these characters that have so much IP to play with, why do they keep going back to the same things over and over? I don't get it. Anyway, does this bother me and not you? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, and thanks for listening.